Hello, everyone. This is Richard Kazami, and this is the Old Astoria Neighborhood Association's monthly meeting. We appreciate you joining us. I'd like to begin this meeting, which will feature Senator Kristen Gonzalez of District 59, which encompasses parts of Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, and James Mangeluzzo of the New York City Comptroller Mark Levine's office, who will go over what the Comptroller does and some of the issues they're facing. Before that, I have a couple of updates to give you regarding the neighborhood. First of all, Whitey Ford Field, they are going to have a puppet mobile on July 11th. So mark your calendars and bring the kids. It should be a lot of fun. Also, there are ongoing discussions about covering some of the tennis courts in Astoria Park. These discussions would include creating an RFP or a request for proposals for a seasonal concession to install tennis bubbles on selected Astoria Park courts during the winter months. If you have any questions regarding this, please reach out to us. We may, if there's an interest, ask Parks to come down and explain how this situation works. Again, it's just discussions. It's not for sure. There is a petition running around from different tennis advocates supporting this. Also, the Astoria Park Alliance, their first cleanup was on the 21st. For more information and a full list of upcoming events and cleanups, please go to www.astoriaparkalliance.org. Socrates Sculpture Park is having their gala. It'll be on June 4th. This is a fundraising gala at the Mark DeSuvio Studio on Vernon Boulevard. It's always a great event. So support, have a great event and support arts and culture in our neighborhood. As far as summer cultural events, there's a group of us working to develop a schedule for cultural programming along the waterfront. We will keep everybody updated as plans are finalized. And lastly, Community Board 1 has started a neighborhood rezoning initiative. OANA had an op-ed last year, which requested such a rezoning for the areas between the 2010 Astoria rezoning and the Dutch Kills rezoning. This process of rezoning we've been advocating for since 2014 actually. This initiative is an important step to ensuring that neighborhood growth is thoughtfully planned to optimize both economic development and quality of life benefits for all residents and businesses. So with that, our first presenter, we're very, very happy to bring up State Senator Kristen Gonzalez.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Good
to see you too. I know it's been a little while, but I've been in Astoria a lot the last 3 weekends, canvassing and petitioning, and it's been really nice. So always good to join the Old Astoria Neighborhoods Association. And everyone watching, hello. It's really, again, a joy to be able to present in this organization. I know we had some questions, but from what I understand, Richard, you wanted me to kind of go through an overview of the work I've done and where we are in the budget process. But you let me know how you want to run this. I'm happy to do whatever.
Yeah, well, why don't you start? I do have some questions. Let's go through them. And then if there's anything you want to add at the end that we didn't address, okay, I think that might be a great way to do it. And also, if you could begin, though, with describing yourself and some of your background and how you ended up in this position. I know we first met when we were in the Queens General Assembly.
Yes.
A while ago. Yep. So,
time's moving quick.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I am Kristen Gonzalez. I am the state senator for District 59, which is a really unique Senate district. It covers 3 boroughs in Western Queens. So it's Astoria, Long Island City. It's Northern Brooklyn in Greenpoint and Williamsburg. And it's also the east side of Manhattan from 14th Street up to the UN. And this district was created as a result of the redistricting process, which is based on the census. And as a result of that, it was created, and I ran in 2022. So this is my second term in office. My fourth year, as Senate and Assembly terms are 2 years at a time. Before I took office, I was a proud community board member in Queens Community Board 3. I actually worked on those census efforts through the community board. I helped work with the Western Queens Community Land Trust. I was their secretary on the founding board. I worked on Internet for All initiatives during the pandemic and Mutual Aid NYC. And I know there were so many mutual aid efforts that we talked to in Western Queens. And I know, Richard, you had done so much too. So to all the neighbors who are watching, it has been inspiring to just be part of the Western Queens community for so long. I was a tech worker, while I was doing all of that work and wasn't planning on running. But once the district was created, I had some really great organizer friends through all of those efforts who kind of gave me the nudge to do it. And so I ran that year, and then I ran again since then for reelection. And in my time in office, to kind of quickly go through what we've been focused on, of course, as a former tech worker, I was really proud to be appointed by the majority leader to the chairwomanship rather, of the Internet Technology Committee, which I've chaired now for the full 4 years. And in addition to that, I chair the Elections Committee. I'm one of the few members to chair 2 committees. It means I spend a lot of my time working on AI regulation, on making sure we're closing the digital divide, but also thinking about how technology and social media and deep fakes impact our elections. And so a lot of the work I've done has been, for example, on AI and political communications, passing the first law, in New York on actually regulating the use of deepfakes and giving campaigns the ability to seek damages. We've worked on cybersecurity for our elections. We had actually last year in December, a full day event where we had the Board of Elections come and present, because a lot of our local boards had federal support that had since been cut. I think we're doing a really good job in New York State, of course, of stepping up, but it's been an honor to be able to work at the intersection of democracy and technology, and we continue and want to continue doing that work. In addition to that, I've worked a lot on data centers and the transition to renewable energy. One of the other big committees I don't chair, but I sit on, is the Energy Committee. And I think that's really important for Astoria because of the Ravenswood power plant. I think we all know that Astoria has been known to be Asthma Alley, and that's a result of our reliance on fossil fuels. So we have to make sure that we're transitioning to renewables, and certainly transitioning the power plant in New York City and Ravenswood to battery storage. But that's been challenging given now the federal landscape. I helped pass the Build Public Renewables Act in my first year through the committee, but we're going to have to continue pushing to make sure we're maximizing the amount of renewable energy that we're building according to that law. And then certainly bringing it to this year and what some of the priorities are. We are in the budget process. A focal point in this budget process is our climate law, our landmark climate law, which is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That set a standard for us to transition fully, for the most part, 70% by 2030 to renewable energy as a state. And we've fallen far behind those goals. So in this moment, our governor is considering reevaluating the timeline, along with some other key changes that I think would certainly impact our timelines for transitioning the Ravenswood power plant. So yeah, it's been a big focus on environmental justice for us, and holding the line on our climate laws. I think, yeah. And I think, Richard, I was actually perfectly going to turn to you, because I'm like, I think some of the questions you had were around budget and what else has been going on too.
Yeah, exactly. I guess in terms of the AI, you discussed the AI in relations to the elections and our democracy. Also, what are you doing in terms of individuals, policies affecting residences and everyday life, whether at work, school, or online, protecting jobs, making sure that AI integrates within their lifestyles without causing any havoc and destruction? Is there anything along those lines that you can discuss?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I'm going to separate that into like a few buckets. So, to start, we need just general guardrails on not only existing types of AI, like you're thinking, machine learning. But then you hear this term generative AI and this idea that it's this new evolution of technology. And it's true. It's like generative AI is when we think about our, again, you chat GPTs of the world, they're models that are trained on data on a scale we've never seen before. And, they present new challenges. So we need these guardrails for these new models. And I'm really proud that the state's passed a few. I'm proud to be the sponsor of the New York AI Act, which asks companies to report on how they're auditing these tools, set some, frameworks for impact assessments and risk. We did pass the RAISE Act last year, which was signed into law, and that was on things like by using those ChatGPT tools to make weapons, right? Or some of the really existential things, asking those language models to support in nuclear or biochemical or weapons. Like it's these things that we wouldn't necessarily, again, it's like, you and I, when we talk about daily uses, we don't think about that, but it's true that they're so powerful. They could be used for that. So it was important to just start there, right? So we got the general frameworks and like that, just creating these like bigger bills to help rein in this technology. And then to your point, there's like the everyday uses. And there are some bills that I have on that, for example, on minors and chatbots. I worked on this bill with the Attorney General's office. But one of my bills this year actually set some standards for how these chatbots should be engaging with younger users. Should they, it should not be anything that is sexually explicit, for example, or that encourages harm. And, these would be first in the nation bills because the technology has moved so fast. It's been rolled out so quickly. And at this point, 72% of young people say that they use these tools. And it's led to things like suicides. It's led to assisting with school shootings. So those are some of the daily risky uses that we have bills for from a jobs perspective. And I think that's the last bucket is, we've passed the Loading Act, which was a first in the nation bill we worked on with a few of the unions that protected government workers from automation and also teachers. And I think if we are able to protect those jobs, we can set a standard for how to protect other jobs so people can use these technologies, but as a tool and not a replacement.
Good. I guess also you sponsored a bill, including, I guess, S1169A about establishing a state chief AI officer. What kind of responsibilities would they have?
So the governor has actually already hired a chief AI officer, which happened after we introduced this bill. But we want to see that office more formalized. And what it would do is create some reporting, for example, to the legislature. It would also centralize so there are government standards for how our, state agencies are using artificial intelligence. It would make sure that there was reporting to the chief AI officer to help standardize those across the agencies and make sure people are actually following it. We found this year when I questioned one of our agency chairs on if, they had received any report on some of the tools that came out of an audit that we helped create, and they hadn't received any risk assessments, any reports whatsoever. So it's concerning to me that we've started using these across our state agencies, but there isn't actually like accountability on if we're following all the guidances. Yeah. So that's definitely a big one for us.
Good. All right, great. Yeah. On a different subject, you supported legislation like the New York for All Act, which would limit state and local agencies sharing immigration status information. For immigration families in our communities, what would change in practical terms?
So for folks who are maybe less familiar with the New York for All Act, it is a bill that would prevent, authorities, so like local police departments, from actively supporting ICE. It doesn't mean, of course, that police departments can get in the way of ICE. ICE is a federal authority. To be clear, we can't stop them when they're, in our communities, but we certainly don't want to see our police departments support them, which is an extension of a law that already exists in New York City. New York City, when we say it's a sanctuary city, it's a large part because of that. The NYPD is not supposed to be aiding in immigration enforcement. But that protection doesn't extend to upstate or Long Island. So I don't think much substantively would change on our, in New York City, because we've had those sanctuary laws for some time. But there are a lot of New York City residents that travel outside of the city for things like work or family. And we want to make sure that wherever they are in the state, they're protected. And I think that will be a big difference, is being able to move freely within New York and know that there is some sort of protection for our immigrant communities.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work, particularly construction and things like that, when people do have to travel to different job sites. So that is important. Yeah. Housing. It's a major concern right now in Western Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan. And, what actions at the state level will residences actually feel in the next year or two regarding their positions on housing?
So we had a big housing package that happened a couple of years back, and that big package included $1 billion for the city of Yes, so that the city could build out housing, and also at deeper affordability than what we had previously. And we also included tenant protections like good cause eviction, or a version of it that helped extend protections to folks in market rate units that are owned by bigger landlords and that haven't been built within, or haven't been recently built, which is significant. There are a lot of New Yorkers now who have the good cause protections, which means they have a right to renew their lease, and there is a cap on how much that rent could be increased. We want to keep on building on that. I think, having passed that housing package was a painful process, but it was a worthwhile one. And now part of the way that we're building on it is looking at additional support for homeowners, for example. One thing I was proud to carry was the green, it was a green affordability program. So the GAP fund, that for a small homeowner who wanted to transition to electric but didn't qualify for existing programs because they have big capital improvements that need to be made, there is now a fund. There's $2 million of state money that you can apply for, in part to help with those capital improvements so that you can transition. So we're really looking at, not only individually through my office, what else can we do for our homeowners? What else can we do for our aging housing stock, transitioning, et cetera. But we also want to make sure that we're continuing to support renters. So the last thing I think I'll highlight is the Housing Access Voucher Program. And that provides rental assistance to more residents because we funded it at higher rates. I know for you, Richard, I know we talk a lot about housing, but I always want to extend to your members, if there's something that you all want to see us working on, you think that, property taxes has been in the news a lot recently, we're always happy to hear feedback, and, it's one of our top concerns. So please always reach out to our office if there's something that more we should be doing or supporting.
Yeah, regarding property taxes and the city of Yes, we actually have an op-ed coming out very soon. That's right now, a 1 to 3 family is one class, and a 4 family and above is another. And they have the ADUs. The city of Yes allowed people to establish another apartment within their property. However, the problem is, if you have a 3 family and then you go to a 4 family, your taxes they can end up quadrupling. So unless that is fixed, nobody's going to actually utilize that process. So it's very important that, from our standpoint, that the property taxes be coordinated with the same goals that the city of Yes has. So we do hope that that's addressed. So,
yeah, I certainly don't want to see property taxes go up, but please send the op-ed when you have it. We're always looking to boost.
Good. Okay, you introduced also legislation around the Omni data privacy, which would restrict how transit payment data is shared as transit systems collect more information. What protections should drivers expect or riders expect?
So as we transition to Omni, I think the context for this that I always like starting with is, we're suddenly collecting a lot more data than we did with Metro cards. And especially for our students, there was an article that came out essentially that now we have kind of a mapping of how our students are coming and going. And that's really, that is very sensitive information because it's about it's about minors. And there should be real standards on how the city is collecting it and how they're stewarding that. So we want to see We don't want to see that data stored long term. We don't want to see it going into the hands of law enforcement. I think it's, the bill that we introduced really was to protect, especially our students. But beyond that, I think everyone has a right fundamentally to privacy. And I have another bill, the New York Privacy Act, that is a bigger bill about how your data is, being collected, how it's being stored or shared. And in this year's budget, there's another bill on data brokers, which basically means, sometimes it's not just a single company or an authority like the MTA that's suddenly getting a lot of data about you that could be used for a number of purposes. But sometimes there are companies that are literally dedicated to taking that and buying and selling and creating an entire market around it. And we kind of want to limit that because your personal information, should be personal, and there should be, again, some agency for you to have a say in how it's being used. So those bills are all kind of circling the same issue. But we've seen a lot of support for this. And I think moving forward, riders should expect, we saw the MTA respond saying that they were updating their standards. So at least expect a little bit more privacy than before.
That's an issue that's on all aspects of tech. It's something that we're all dealing with for many years now. So I'm glad to see that you're working for protections on those. So for tenants dealing with rent increases, repairs, eviction concerns, when should they reach out to your office? And how can you help them?
My team is always here to help. If you want to, and I'll make sure I pull it up so that I have the number and I can give it out now. But our email is gonzalez@nysenate.gov. It's my last name, Gonzalez, at nysenate.gov. And our office phone number for our district office is 718-765-6674. Our hours are 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but we also do tabling and events on nights and weekends. So you'll see us at community boards. Always feel free to say hello. And some of the ways our office can help is with, if you have an issue with your landlord, we do housing clinics with Communities Resist. If you are having an issue with Con Ed, we can advocate for you with Con Ed. If you are working through, a program or navigating a state agency, whether Department of Labor, for example, otherwise, we're here to be your advocates. And even if it's not state, if it's something city, you're upset about a pothole, you can still send that to us and we will point you in the right direction or be able to report those things ourselves. So there's a number of ways that we're here, to support all of our constituents. And we really just want folks to know that they can email us, they can call us anytime. And there, we have a number of community liaisons who are ready to pick up the phone and start some casework.
Good. I'd like to ask Victor, who's actually our host, and you haven't met Victor yet, but Victor actually, he also works for the Queens Economic Development Corporation.
Oh, amazing.
Victor,
yeah.
So there he is.
Hey.
He's also a very, very tech oriented guy. He's been helping us for 7-8 years on our tech requirements. Anyway, Victor, if you could put some of that information in the chat so that people could write it down, that would be great, or save it. Okay, great. And just as long as I got you, okay. Next would be, okay, you've also worked on legislation addressing automated decision-making in government, meaning when agencies use algorithms to make decisions about services or eligibility, and what safeguards should people expect from this?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of what I was referencing in terms of protections for government workers and teachers. It means that automation shouldn't get in the way of collective bargaining agreements. And that's why we work so closely with our unions. So I think if you fall in those categories, and you feel like you're being impacted, definitely reach out to us, your unions. But otherwise, it's nice to have a law in the books that actually articulates that protection so that there is a legal foundation, by which those unions can push back and say automation shouldn't be costing us jobs. Yeah, so that's definitely a big part of it. The audit I mentioned on how the government, what tools they were using when we got that inventory based on that audit, that was a result of an earlier version of the bill that was passed. There had been no public reporting on what AI tools our agencies were using. Now we have that, and we're able to have a little bit more transparency because we passed that first version of the bill. So those were two key things that the Loading Act did.
Good. Here's a question that Victor will like. Small businesses in our neighborhoods, like Astoria, they're extremely important, and they are under a lot of pressure. What supportive resources should they know about that you might be able to make them aware of, or that you're sponsoring or working with the state government in order to provide?
Yeah, I am a big fan of working alongside our chambers of commerce. We love the Queen's Chamber. Tom has been very active in Albany, and they're also a great way to connect with resources. They have city resources that exist. I know the city's Department for Small Businesses has been looking to do more clinics, et cetera. And they're also looking to pass laws to make it easier for small businesses. I think what I've heard from the Zeron administration is they've gotten a lot of feedback from how hard it is to even apply for certain licenses. And so they're looking to streamline a lot of that. And, I think that's where we can not only advocate from policy perspective, but make sure you're connected with the city. There are nonprofits that do things like training on how to use data. If you're a small business, we can connect you to a few of those. And I think broadly, I've had cases where, for example, I have a small business or a restaurant that is having a huge issue with Con Ed. And we've reached out to Con Ed directly to say, you got to keep the lights on. We'll figure out things like a payment plan. Maybe the metering wasn't right. But just being able to individually advocate on a case-by-case basis is a big part of our government office. And it's something we've done before. So definitely welcome our small businesses to reach out to us if they're having an issue like that, maybe with their landlord as well. Because we'd really love to be able to use our resources to support them. I think the last thing I'll say, there's some bills out there that might be really exciting for small businesses, like, rent stabilization for small businesses. I think there's a commercial rent bill by Senator Salazar and Assemblymember Gallagher, and we're really supportive. We're a co-sponsor because we know that a lot of our small businesses, especially our brick and mortars, are closing because of the rising cost of commercial rent. So also keep an eye out for some of that work.
Good. It's also an area where property taxes also come into play because there's also big, like just in Astoria, there's a big divergence in the taxes between Steinway Street, which is a retail area, and 30th Avenue and Broadway. And it really puts a lot of pressure on the rents, particularly on Steinway Street. So again, looking at property taxes is extremely important, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also distribution of property taxes. There are places in Queens that are paying more in property tax than places in Manhattan that technically have, or in some of these areas that are considered, incredibly expensive, right? So we shouldn't have our working families disproportionately burdened by property taxes than private equity firms who own in those areas of Manhattan. So we want to make sure that there is property tax reform. And that's something the legislature has discussed.
Good.
Yeah.
I'd like to, Victor, if you'd like to come on. Victor, do you have any questions for the senator, particularly with your tech background? And what's going on with the Queens Economic Development Corporation?
Oh, yeah.
So just to reintroduce myself, Victor Prado. I'm with Queens Economic Development Corporation. The program manager for Astoria. I think that's where we've had some overlap in some of the local civic meetings. My question is, I get asked a lot by small business owners how AI can directly benefit them. I know it's kind of just like a broad question, but I guess to package their general consensus into a single question, do you see anything on the state government level or agency level AI related that you think will be rolled out to masses in terms of business owners that they could use for their businesses? Is there anything like that in the pipeline?
Yeah, so there are organizations like Tech NYC that I think are dedicating resources into upskilling small businesses. I think the state has some versions of that as well. But AI is really a tool, and I think it depends what the use is of that tool. What is the small business trying to accomplish? If you are, for example, a business that wants a chatbot online, I think that is pretty common. These chatbots are good at being customer service associates, but I'd also say be careful because when the city used it as a customer service tool, the My City chatbot, it actually recommended that businesses break the law. So these aren't perfect tools either. And I think we have to be mindful in what context we're using them. And, yeah, I think to a certain extent, a lot of them have been kind of sold as these like silver bullets, but at the end
Yeah.
of the day, there should always be like, you should always be in control of the data that's being used, where that tool is sending information. You should be in charge of how it's being used, and also protected if the outcome of using a chatbot, for example, is negative, and your customer service chatbot certainly says something that is inaccurate to an end user. So we're always here to answer more of those questions, but I always like to caution and say, AI can be a really powerful tool, but you got to be intentional about when and where and how you're using it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the just to end here as well, one thing I hear all the time from owners is the high cost of utilities, especially Con Edison.
Yep.
Do you think AI will play a role in terms of the monitoring of the usage of utilities, electric, gas? Do you see that come in any shape or form?
Yeah. So we have a few bills on things like data centers. Our energy grid is aging. It's already really strained, and we are not keeping up with the demand on our energy grid because we keep growing as a state. We have, we build new buildings, we have new businesses coming in, and there's already a gap in what we project the demand to be by 2030 and what we actually have, the production of currently and what we project to have the production of. And that's with fossil fuel, right? That's not just in the context. I know talked about renewable energy. It's not even like getting into that conversation. It's just like based on what we have and what we think we'll be able to build by 2030. Data centers, which are these massive energy facilities that support tools that are, like ChatGPT, they are a huge drain on our grid. And right now there's over 15 proposals, according to the independent state operator, or NYSO, which receives these applications. And that's why I introduced 3 bills. One, a moratorium on those big data centers, because we just don't have the energy for it. And in that time, we want to see our state planning for those data centers. Another bill I have, the AC/DC Act, actually creates a separate billing cost for those big data centers. So those costs, when it puts more demand on the grid, isn't going to be socialized amongst the rest of us as consumers, right? Like we shouldn't have an increase in our bills like we're seeing in other states simply because we're bringing new data centers online. And the third bill I have is actually incentivizing them to use renewable energy and having some community input. So I think you're right to say AI and energy, like they go hand in hand. And when we talk about utilities and the costs, any additional strain we're at risk of having it jack up our costs, because then they're building new infrastructure. It's, more expensive to deliver, and all of that gets passed down to us. So I'm hoping to get those bills passed this year.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Kristen, anything else you would like to let our listeners know? Anything about other services, or how would you like to wrap this up? But before you leave, I also have a little bit of another introduction to do. Go ahead.
I think we were pretty, I think that's why I always enjoy coming to these, because Richard, you do your research. You are so thorough in like what you're asking, what your members want to talk about. So I don't think I have a ton to add. We're working right now on, I know there's a city budget crisis. We're working on corporate taxes for the mayoral administration. I think that's maybe one big thing. But ultimately, once the budget's passed, I'm always happy to share what we won, what we're doing to raise revenue, and really where that state money is going. And I think we'll see more money go to the city this year. And that's a big win for all of us.
Good. Speaking of budget, our next guest, and I thought I would bring him up now because he says you guys are old friends. So you can say hello to each other.
We've known each other for a while.
Hey,
hey, how's the family?
Pretty good. Yeah, can't complain. Two kids
God.
and a dog now. Yeah.
So yeah, we met before he had the. I think he still had a dog.
Yeah.
When did you get the dog?
No, I had a dog after I met you, so shortly after. I think.
Oh, okay,
Maybe
okay.
2018 is when I got
Yeah,
the dog.
yeah. From back in the CB,
2019.
CB4 days.
Yeah.
But no, it's so good to see you. I hope everything is well. And I mean, I know I'm up in Albany this time of year, but I know your boss is active too, so probably we'll see you out in the district. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Well,
James, do
I
you
know
have any
I want to
questions?
give James is the star of the show now, so I'm gonna hop off and turn it to him. But I just want to say thank you again, Richard, for having me, and thank you. Yeah,
Okay, thank you so much. It's important that we get interaction with our elected officials and
of course,
agencies and all government, so people can frankly keep government accountable. It's very, very, very important. So thank you for
100%.
doing it.
Happy to do it. I hope to see you all soon. All right, take
Okay.
care. Have
All
a good
right.
night.
Okay.
Bye.
And James,
Yeah.
how are you?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here. Thanks for
Good.
having me on.
Good. James, if you could explain who you are, who you work for, and actually what the agency that you work for actually does.
Yeah.
Describe the role of, of the Comptroller's office.
All right. So my name is James Mangeluzzo. I'm the Queensborough Director for our Bureau of Public Affairs. That's one of the many bureaus of the Comptroller's office. Now, the Comptroller's office is a pretty large agency. It's independent of the mayor. It has about 750 employees, and they do a lot of different things. Essentially, the Comptroller is like the chief financial officer of the city. He's in charge of monitoring a lot of the fiscal situation of the city, like monitoring the budget, making recommendations on the budget. We also certify the budget at the end, which doesn't mean we can block the budget if we don't like it. It just means we ensure that it's legal and we sign off on it. Yeah, we can't stop things, unfortunately, if they're done the right way, as many people wish we could. So we also audit all the city agencies. We're in charge of finding efficiencies and inefficiencies, exposing inefficiencies in government, exposing fraud. We're involved in issuing bonds so that we can use that money for our public infrastructure. We're also in charge of registering the contracts that the city goes into with private entities. Not all contracts, but like a lot of them end up coming through our office. And again, similarly with that, just because we maybe think a contract is not the best use of money, but it's still legal, we still sign off on it if there's no corruption and it hits some other boxes. But it's a big office. There's a lot. There's pensions also. We monitor the pensions for performance. We make recommendations, but we don't solely control the pensions and solely control all the investments in the pension. There are trustees that work with us. There's a lot more, and I'll probably end up mentioning more as we go through the questions.
Good. Okay. And also we have a new controller too. So do you have any first impressions working with Comptroller Levine?
Yeah, well, this is my third controller, Comptroller Levine is a very personable guy. He's really trying to get to know the office, go to all the different floors, learn about all the units, learn about the work they've been doing. He's really trying to get to know people and get a firm grasp on all the intricacies of the office that a lot of people, even if they're running for the office and are very knowledgeable about the office, it's impossible to know every little single thing. But he's really trying to find out every little single thing that's going on in the office that you might not otherwise be aware of if you didn't really try to find it. So, he's been great.
Good.
And he's been trying to, be outside a lot and meeting people and, being very engaged in the public affairs aspect.
Great. How does the Comptroller's office actually show up in the daily lives of people? I know you explained a lot of little things here,
Yeah.
But within the daily lives, what actually happens for people? How would you say that the Comptroller's office affects them?
Right. Well, one thing, we have tons of people who are retirees in the city who rely on the pensions. So one way is that, we make suggestions for all 5 of the city's pension systems. Again, like we don't tell the trustees what to do. We have a vote, but we don't have the majority vote. We make some suggestions on what to invest in and what not to invest in and so on. And that obviously has a lot to do with how much money people who are retirees end up having, right? Our pension systems are doing well. We're always paying, they're able to pay people on time with the amount that they're supposed to get paid. Although the on time part, I know that's not us. Sometimes the actual pension systems have some issues, but we don't control their day-to-day operations. But the money is there, is what I want to say. So that's a big boost to the economy to make sure people who are retired have money and can operate and live here in New York City. If you're not involved with that, if you're not a retiree or someone's going to get a pension, another thing we do is claims. So when people have their property or their person damaged by a city entity, like a rotted tree that you call 311 about for months, and then it falls on your car, right? We're involved in doing all the investigations. So we're involved in, offering settlements or deciding if the city's liable or not, which, can have a big impact on people's lives. Not everyone obviously uses that service, and hopefully you don't have to use it, but that's one way we're there. And we're always auditing. We're always auditing to find efficiencies, to find ways to save money, to save taxpayer money, to make sure programs work effectively, and to show where things are not working, to try to hopefully improve your day-to-day lives with things like, rain gardens or things like services related to FDNY or NYPD, things, and schools even, So those are some of the things.
Good. Has Comptroller Levine actually established any priorities yet?
Yeah, I would say one priority he's really interested in is housing construction. Now, our office doesn't have a affordable housing construction specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our office doesn't have discretionary funding. We can't just earmark money to a project. But one thing we can do is we can use something called economically targeted investments. So what we can do is we can use up to 2% of the pension fund assets to invest in projects where we think there are market inefficiencies. One market inefficiency we see is the lack of affordable housing, right? I'm sure everyone has heard of this. So one priority is to find ways to use that money to find specific investments. They have to meet certain guidelines. They have to have a certain expected return on investments for us to use pension funds for particular projects like that. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to find ways to do that. In the last administration, it wasn't used, as much as some people would have liked. I know in the previous administration prior to that, they had we created a special bureau under the Stringer administration that had dealt with economic development issues and dealt with the economically targeted investment. But we're trying to make it more in the forefront than it previously was. So that's a big priority, and we think we can make tens of thousands of affordable homes probably within the term, 4 years, or at least fund it. Not that it would be constructed, but fund it within the 4 years.
Oh, access to capital. I mean, nothing moves without access to capital. And if you do have it, then utilizing it in a positive way is very important. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too to fund that is also floating some of the bonds, right? We just sold a bunch of bonds, and that was being done with Comptroller Lander in the last term as well, continuing that to sell some of these city bonds that could be used for things like that.
Good. The office has raised concerns about future budget gaps. Projected shortfalls between the city spending and revenue. What should residents understand about how that could affect services?
Yeah, I mean that's a big issue, right? The mayor has, I mean, obviously this is a big thing. The mayor is trying to find some ways to save money, right? Now, our office for years, under the Lander administration into the current Levine administration, have been saying that we think there's issues in the way Mayor Adams was proposing the budget, and presenting the budget, and that there were a lot of costs that were under budgeted that they really knew about, but they were pretending that they didn't. And some of those costs are coming home to bear. There's also like under estimation of what the revenues would be. And then they say like, oh, wow, look at all this money that we didn't expect, but they expected it, So there's like all these tricks that they do in the show and dance in the negotiations with the city council, which, I guess it's typical, but we felt like there was a lot of that going on in the Adams administration. But, Comptroller Lander had been sounding off at various meetings like Financial Control Board that there are some serious issues. And all of our reports were consistent in showing that. The budget reports that we had where we would say, well, we don't think the mayor's budget is accurate. And also the accountancy report that comes at the end of the year or the end of October. I think it's usually October 31st it comes out. It's like kind of a spooky report to go with Halloween that sometimes shows that the spending is not always totally in line with the revenues coming in and so on. And all these are public reports, you can look at. They're not always the sexiest reports and people don't always read them, and they don't get reported on as widely as maybe we wish they would. But essentially what Mayor Mamdani's doing is he's trying to find ways to save money. And we have a budget. We just reviewed the mayor's executive budget, and we had some suggestions of where we think maybe they're underestimating what the costs are and how much money they need to save. And I know that the mayor has started doing that already. He said that he's found some ways to save some money, but we're going to need to find more ways. Now, in terms of the services, I don't have specifics of like what exactly is likely to be cut or positions that are not going to get filled. But I'd say based on the past, it's likely that some of the positions in the city agencies are just not going to get filled. And that's going to be, you're going to save money by not paying people salaries and people benefits. And you just might need to not hire as many people as you ideally would like to. I don't suspect that there's going to be like layoffs in this year. Like I wouldn't think that. So I think the people who are working there, providing the services and helping the government work will still be there, but there may be less hiring than maybe would be ideal, in the most ideal circumstance. And then they're just going to try to find other ways to save money, like not rent as much space, because the city rents physical space for offices. They're going to try to find some efficiencies there, maybe renegotiate certain contracts, especially related to medicine through like New York City, like the health and hospitals and stuff. So they're just going to try to like find as many ways at saving, but it's hard to say like if that's going to be enough, but that's what they have to do. I don't think they're going to raise property taxes, which is a concern that a lot of people have. It seems unlikely. And some people have said that the mayor has spoken privately about, and is basically walking back his position on that. There is one thing to say about that. Like the city budget has to be balanced when it's proposed. So really one of the only things that the city can control with like taxes is a property tax. Most of the other taxes, like the personal income tax or sales tax, that's controlled by the state. So Mamdani or the council, they would need to convince the state to change the rates. But one thing they can do within a certain band is they could increase the property tax. So even though the city council would have to do that, not the mayor, but I guess like the mayor, when he's saying what the budget's going to be or how they're going to increase revenues, the one thing he kind of can control, though, again, it's the city council, he can kind of control the property tax. So it's kind of plausible for him to say, well, to make up the shortfall, we'll increase the property tax, because he can
a lot of that I think might have been also leverage.
That too. Also, that leverage. Yeah, absolutely. Because also, like, if he said he was going to propose all these new taxes, but hasn't talked to anybody in the state or the governor about it, that doesn't seem credible or believable. But if he says he can increase property taxes, at least it sounds somewhat credible. And he's basically mandated to balance the budget or present a balanced budget. And that's one way to present a balanced budget. I don't think he actually intends to go through on that.
Well, politically, it would be difficult. But I do say, going back to my conversation earlier with the senator, is that, property taxes themselves really need to be equitable. And they need to really be coordinated with the other agencies and other policies. Right now, like I said, even with City of Yes, at this point, the property taxes would actually hinder the goals of the City of Yes unless they're actually properly coordinated. So we hope that that gets
Right.
looked
Yeah.
at.
Like changing the tax classes. Yeah. And then there's just like a huge problem with inequity across the system with, people in areas that have been generally more stable since like the 1970s that haven't had huge upswings or downturns in either direction. They're proportionately paying more property tax in relation to the estimated value of their home compared to people who lived in the areas that have had more of the shocks.
Yep. Speaking of that, and getting more funds the other way, there's taxation, but there's also oversight on costs for capital projects and things like that, which is one of your big functions. Do you think there's enough independent oversight of project costs before public funds are actually committed, or does most review happen too late to actually change the process? I know that you got mandated, I think, to review capital projects after they've already been established, which seems to me the wrong time to do it. So
yeah, I think it maybe depends. Like, I don't think it's like an easy answer here that it's like always one way or the other. I think there are situations where there are tremendous cost overruns, and there's maybe a reason for it, like especially in some of the recent economic climate of the last few years, where there was like inflation that maybe couldn't have been projected when the projects were started. And obviously there's going to be some cost overruns. There's going to be issues related to there were supply chain issues during COVID, right? So like a lot of things went a lot more over budget, and it would have been almost impossible to anticipate that there was going to be a pandemic or like some of those things were going to happen. So I think some of that is not really the fault of oversight. But then there certainly are situations where probably there could be better oversight. Our office doesn't have an official position on that, so I don't want to speak. I can maybe give you my personal opinion, but I'm not here to represent myself. But we don't have an official position on this particular question. But
even on the community board level, okay, which is I have 26 years on the community board here. I've often felt that when agencies come to us with capital projects, or also by the same token on land use, when the developers come to us and complain that in fact they can't build unless they get certain zoning changes, while the opposition says that they're just being greedy and they're making money, but they never have to actually provide financials. So we sit on the board, and then it becomes a political exercise because there's no way to make an actual decision based on real numbers. And the same token with when a capital project comes in. I know that I had often thought it would be great if, similar to what city planning does, when they have a representative on each community board, and then we can go to them to get their opinions on something before we make a decision. If the comptroller's office also had such a representative, we could go to them and say, can you look at this particular budget for this capital project or this private sector project? Give us the information so we can make credible decisions. Because right now the decisions are they come out of thin air. Because unless you have real numbers, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard you talk to me. You've talked to me about this, I think, right?
Yeah.
Before.
And the thing is, too, that since community boards are beginning of the process, you would have established the validity of some of these things, these numbers, before they get to the next step, the borough president, the city council, and right through. And if we know that numbers are real, everybody's going to make different decisions. So that's my 2 cents.
I would like to think that, but sometimes I'm not so sure, because I think sometimes things are very political, right? They're not always about what makes the most fiscal sense sometimes, unfortunately, or there's more than fiscal considerations sometimes. I think some people are into like legacy and so on.
Right now, it's 90% political, so I'd like to see, at least on the level of the community board. So it'd
Yeah,
be
I
great
mean,
to.
I can bring that back to see if there's any way we could do something like that. I mean, right now, I don't think we have, budget lines to create dedicated people to do something like that. I don't know if we could really mandate some certain employees who deal more in those areas to work outside of their schedule and so on, or if it's, convenient for them to be doing that. But I mean, it's an interesting idea. I know, like you have mentioned it before,
Mhm.
but like I said, I can take it back and see what's said. We have a new administration now, so maybe they're interested in trying to do something out of the box, or to see if there's something that there might be some added value to doing something like that. So I can definitely bring it back and see what they say.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's we already answered that question. Of climate-related investing that you guys do, including reducing exposure to fossil fuel assets, how do you balance financial returns with the long-term risk?
Well, everything.
Yeah.
So in terms of our pension investments, we, have a fiduciary responsibility to make money for all the pensioners and make sure that we're investing in a way that we're meeting our targets. Usually we're able to exceed it. So when we decide that something we want to divest in something, like, for example, with the fossil fuel situation, that was started under Comptroller Stringer and went through Comptroller Lander, like the big divestment. I think it was around $3 billion, like 2018 to 2021. A lot of it was related to fossil fuel reserve, or companies that held or managed fossil fuel reserves. So there was a big analysis done. There was like independent consultants by 3 of the 5 pension systems. So NYCERS, which is the main one, TRS, which is the teacher one, BERS, which is employees in Department of Education that are not the teachers. NYCERS is like most of the government employees that aren't basically fire, education, or police employees. So that's the big pension fund. And, they did independent analysis of whether or not there was risk involved in investing in these companies. And we're long-term investors. So we're really looking at the long-term implications, because we have to worry about the pension working for people like me who are working now, not just the people who are already retired. So we really look at the long-term trajectory to see if it's a safe investment. Is this, are these companies going to be, solvent in the future? Or is this going to be maybe a type of technology that's not making as much money? So we can, assess whether or not there's risk. And I don't know like all the specifics of what was done here, but like the consultants and our office and the trustees like agreed that there was risk involved in investing in these type of companies. So those 3 pension systems divested. The other pension systems, the police and the fire, they didn't go through the same exercise, and their trustees decided not to divest. Right? It's the trustees that make the final decision, not the comptroller's office. But we always have to make sure we're making money. That's the goal. It's not about whether or not we think something is good or bad. It's really about whether or not it's going to make money for the people who are owed the pension.
The Comptroller's office also engaged companies in human rights and governance issues, using its role as an investor to push for changes. How do you decide when you want to get in that kind of involvement, when you're using the leverage of your investments in order to make substantive changes within these companies and agencies?
Right. So, I mean, again, we're looking at risk. It's a risk if the company is abusing the workers, because that exposes them to litigation, which means that their value might decrease if they are, if they lose these lawsuits, which seems likely if there's some blatant violations happening, or like anti-union things happening when the law says, you can't interfere in union creation in a certain way. So the reason we step in again is to protect the investment, because we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that these companies are in good shape and that they're safe investments and that we're making money off of these things so we can pay the pensioners and pay for future pensioners. So we're always looking, to see how we can use the fact that we own so many shares to influence the boards of these companies, or maybe change people who are in the management positions and get other investors to, to follow our resolutions and to vote in a certain way to make sure we can make these companies safer investments, so they're not flaunting laws.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Now, many residents don't realize that they may be owed money through claims or unclaimed funds handled by the city. How can they check and access those resources?
Yeah, so there's a website. There's a page on our website. Let me see. I'll try to put it in the chat, but I was having trouble doing that. I can email it to you too, and you maybe can.
What you do is actually don't put it in the chat, but put it in the private chat, and Victor will transfer it to the main chat. And I think if you can do that.
Okay. Okay, so what you can do is you can go to the website. We have a database. I'll put it in after I'm done speaking. I don't want to stop in the middle.
And Victor,
you can search for your name of friends and family to see if you're owed money. And the database that we have is for people that are owed money because of prevailing wage law. Our office has a Bureau of Labor Law. We enforce the prevailing wage law. If you work for a private company that has a contract with the city, maybe you're pruning trees through a private company as a contract with the city, or fixing the road. If the private company, when they get the contract, they are mandated to pay what is called the prevailing wage. Our office sets it. It depends on what type of job you're doing. And you have to pay the workers a certain rate. What we notice is a lot of these companies shave off like 25 cents, 50 cents an hour. People don't even realize it when they're getting their paycheck. And then we go back, we investigate, we see that people are owed money. Sometimes over the course of the contract, people owed hundreds or thousands of dollars, and sometimes they don't know because maybe they were working for several years and it was such a small amount per paycheck that you didn't even realize it. And then we try to find these people, and if we can't find them, we put them on the database because we can't find their last known address is not where they are, and so on. And then you can just search your names of friends and family, and you never know how much money you're owed. Kristen used to be on Community Board 4. She was just mentioning that the district manager, he searched through our website and found that one of his friends was owed a ton of money, and the guy had no idea. So we're hoping to get the word out there. So search for other people too, not just for yourself.
Oh, that's great. That's good. Okay. If a resident has an issue with a city agency, such as a claim or dispute, when should they reach out to your office, and how can you help?
So I'm going to say two things there. One thing is we have something called the Community Action Center, and they're the people that answer the phones at our office and deal with constituent concerns. So if you have an issue with a city agency and you're trying to, get a resolution, we know the bureaucracy really well. We have people at our office that have worked at the Comptroller's office longer than I've been alive, and they know the ins and outs of the city bureaucracy above like the top level people that change for every administration. The people that are like career people in DOT or DEP who work there for 30, 40 years, we know all their contacts. We know who to speak to. So if you have an issue, you can reach out directly to me, and I'll connect you to those people, and they'll try to resolve things that way. The other issue is the claim against the city, where there's physical damage, or maybe it even could be emotional damage, depending on what the situation is. Physical damage to your property or to your body. You can file a claim against the city. You just have there's laws governed by the state that says like when you can do it, what the timeline is. But you got to do it as quickly as you can, right? That's what I'm going to say. You have to do it within 90 days of the date of the incident of the thing that you're filing the claim about. And then our office will have an investigation. We'll look at your side of the story. You can send us pictures, videos, whatever kind of documentation, estimates, and so on. And then we'll look at the agency side to see if they were liable, to see if maybe they were supposed to have fixed something a year ago and they didn't, to see if they weren't doing their proper maintenance schedule. And then we may offer you a settlement if we find the city to be liable in that situation. Sometimes we're not able to make a determination. And in those cases, we'll tell you beforehand, before like the statute, before the expiration of the timeline that we're allowed to make a decision, and we'll tell you we don't have enough information to make a decision. We're not sure if the city's liable or not. If you want to continue, you can sue the city in civil court. So we'll let you know if we're unable to make a decision.
Okay. Good. At this point, I'd like to see number one. Victor, are you available? Are you still there? There he is. So, and you guys have met, we met earlier, but Victor, do you have any questions for James?
No, I mean, I think I would think the general consensus, like, here, comptroller, it kind of goes over your head. You're like, oh, I don't know what they do, or, I think the title is a little tricky for, they handle the money of the city, right? To sum it up. I think a lot of, I can just reflect some concerns from the kind of more boots on the ground, in terms of the small business ownership in Astoria. A lot of them are just kind of on edge about the whole property tax hike because that affects the businesses directly, which then goes directly into consumer pricing. So you've already kind of communicated to Richard in terms of your thoughts on that whole thing, but when can business owners kind of expect to read on the paper or see it on Twitter, when a possible solution, or maybe like, hey, we found $5 billion here, so don't worry, property taxes are going up,
Well, I think you're going to see it slowly. I think basically there was a video today that I think it was today that the mayor put out, Mayor Mamdani, I believe it was today, where he parodied that Eric Adams video from when Eric Adams was in the Senate, the video with the crack pipe when he's like going around the house and trying to find like if your child has contraband. I don't know if you know what video I'm talking about, but this was like many years ago before he was Brooklyn borough president. So he made like a parody video of that where he's searching a house and finding money, and he's explaining that, we are gonna, we found savings this way, that way. So you're gonna see things like that trickling, and then by May and June, well, hopefully before June, you're gonna, in the negotiations with the city council, there's going to be a lot more information about what the budget is. I think first we're waiting for the state budget to get settled, supposed to be settled on April 1st, and then it'll like trickle into the city budget season. We'll see what the state gives us, and then you're going to see things slowly change. And the city council, I think, is really against change, like increasing property taxes, just because of the nature of the people that they represent. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So around April, May, serious gains will be made on that front.
I would think so for sure. Yeah, I would definitely think so.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
One second, I need to physically move because my wife needs the space for her meeting. But I'll just stay on the audio.
We just have one more question, or one more thing. I'd like to see if you would like to take a closing statement or something you want to say to everybody. We've gone through a series of questions here, so.
Okay.
And we greatly appreciate that you have joined us.
I guess yeah, sorry, I really need to move here. But my closing statement is
a little bit of light on an agency that people really, don't know much about. So.
Yeah, sorry. One second. My closing statement. Sorry, I just really have to move here. Sorry. One second. Okay. Here, let me put the video back on. Okay, no.
There we go.
There we go. All right. So my closing statement is, I really hope you learned something from what I've said here today, and we do have lots of resources. I'm really happy to directly talk to anyone. I put my phone number in the chat. I'll say it verbally. It's 646-689-6509. Again, it's 646-689-6509. That's my government cell phone number. You can call it. You could text it at any time, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever you want. I might not answer. I might not respond until it's the next business day or the next time I'm working, but, feel free to reach out. I put my email in there as well, which is jmongel@comptroller.nyc.gov. Again, J for James, MONGEL, first 6 letters of my last name, and then @comptroller.nyc.gov. So please reach out if you have any issues. Like if you want to propose an audit, if you see a city program that you think is not working or something a city agency is doing that you think is ridiculous, let us know. That's how we decide audits sometimes, when we get the public to tell us what's going on. If you see contracts, companies that have contracts with the city that you think aren't doing the job, or if you think there's corruption, please let us know. You know, we sometimes have been able to reveal corruption because of whistleblowers, people like you letting us know what's going on. If you want information about the city budget, literally, if you want to know how much a project is projected to cost or how long it's going to take, you can literally reach out to me and I will have our budget bureau do a quick analysis of it and give you what the official numbers are. I mean, they might change later, but we can give you the official numbers. If you want to buy a bond, if you want to have that for your own investment, please reach out to me too. I can connect you to the team that will help you to purchase the bonds. So I don't know, there's a lot there. The labor law stuff. Oh, I didn't put that in, but I'll get that to you. You know, if you want to find the database and so on. And we do tons of policy reports. And if you have a proposal of something you think we should study, we can pitch it to our policy team and they might write a report on it to write about ways the city can be more efficient. It's happened before from people just like you proposing things.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. I like that. Okay. Well, thank you so much, James. And I hope that the audience learned a lot. And by the way, I also want to mention to the audience that if you had any questions, you know, it was always possible for you to put those questions in the chat. If we do get questions after the fact here, you can also email us at info@oana-ny.org. We'll put that in the chat, and either for the Senator Gonzalez or for James, and we can get back to them and try and get answers to those questions and then send it back to you. With that, again, thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Victor Prado, our host, for helping us out as he always does. James, it's great to see you. We want to also thank Kristen Gonzalez, our great senator up in Albany. Guys, have a great evening, and we'll see each other next month. Thank you so much.